Okay, so I told you a little bit about why you're here, like what we're doing with the Babel campaign. And I want to share your interview. And I told you I wanted to interview you, but I didn't tell you why. So I'm going to tell you why now. From the last event that we did, every time I do yoga, I think of you. It is the most interesting thing. And it just creates like this really big space for me to feel like what I do matters. It's so interesting. And I don't know exactly how you did that, Paige, but showing up the way that you do, engaging authentically, and creating this aesthetic really enabled me to feel that space so deeply. And it makes me think of you all the time. And it makes me hold myself a little bit higher and in greater confidence. So I want to thank you for that. I appreciate that. And that's why I wanted to interview you.
Wow, I'm about to cry. Such a heartfelt intention, and you kind of speak to or get to the marrow of the interconnectedness, and also what I think is possible when we engage with all of our hearts. And what's been a fun journey for me over the last maybe 24 years is seeing my yoga world and my design world come together and coalesce, not only within myself, this kind of body, this transformative portal that I've been granted with this lifetime. It's been a really interesting conversation to fuse my worlds within me and then have my conversation, my offering imbued with this kind of palpable love.
We've never done yoga together.
Mm-mm.
I don't think we ever even really talked about yoga.
No.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is fascinating.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And it's a very moving experience, you know, when you come into my yoga practice, Paige. So, and quite joyful. Keep on keeping on, girl. You are a badass. Those gifts you're giving are really good. And we're grateful for them.
Yeah, I feel similarly about you, to be honest.
Thank you.
I think that's one of the things that's really fun about aging and really coming into one's own. There's this really clear recognition of rising up and meeting each other and mirroring and acknowledging, look what you're doing. You're fully grounded and authentic in your beingness. And I really like everything that you are expressing and all the ways that you're allowing us to see these sides of yourself as they come through in our clothing and in our personalities and in our conversations, right?
Yes.
Because eventually we get to a point where we can acknowledge and recognize everybody's greatness, right? That's what I'm really after, right? Yes. And it's really about cultivating those opportunities and listening from a place of authenticity that allows you to really pinpoint, what is it about this person standing in front of me that inspires me or brightens me or allows me to then rise to my own occasion, right?
Yes. Did you always want to be a designer? Has that always been your goal? Interior designer, let's be clear, even though you're creative in a lot of facets professionally.
I had a long and windy road to being a designer. I was a professional dancer before I was a designer.
Really?
And I had a segue into the world of corporate America. I was a Unix programmer and a global program manager at Hewlett Packard. I ran their education, online education department for global services. So I was a mid-level executive.
So interesting.
And, you know, when I was working at Pervidian Financial, I would decorate the inside of my cubicle. And looked like a series of collages. And so I was already playing with bespoke wallpapers and collaging them. And so when everybody would come over to my cubicle, they were always like, what is happening here? And I would always, you know, my outfits were always on par, and I always had lots of raw silk and you know, fuchsia blazers and things of that nature. And eventually I decided to not try to put the round peg in the square hole, and I kind of spread out into myself, and I just literally hung up the golden handcuffs and went back to graduate school at, like, I don't know, 35 or some just high enough in my career where it was really going to make a difference, where I was like, oh, I'm really going to go and work for like a fourth or a half of my salary for a couple of years. So I just decided to follow my muse. And I had some really great parents that were always really appreciative of my path. And when I was dancing, they were really supportive of that. And when I decided to go back to the arts life that I had lived before and go back to graduate school, they were supportive of that. So I think that helped me to expand into who I am now. And ironically, having been in the corporate world for a while and in the upper management, I got to understand how systems work and how operations work. Yeah. So when again, this idea of bringing worlds together, I had my business background and, you know, could fluently speak with a number of different people at different kind of levels within the organization. And then I had my design background. When I put those together to form LocziDeisgn, it felt a little bit more full circle than you would have thought.
Yeah, coalesced really well. But there's something innate in you of even going back to school. There's this, you know, strength and core of follow and flow, your authenticity, even before you made that decision, which I think is really badass.
I appreciate that. My mother would say sometimes that's hubris. So an example of this hubris or overconfidence or declare something and make it so is that my first commission job I obtained the 3 weeks before I started graduate school. I was at a Christmas party, and these young men were on the roof of this party, and they asked me what I did for a living, and I said, "Oh, I'm an interior designer." I didn't go to school yet, and
you landed.
I landed the job, and so my first job was a penthouse in San Francisco, and I did all of the faux finishing, and I did all the landscape architecture, and I kind of made it my showcase project, and they let me have a launch party for my company, LocziDeisgn, on the rooftop when I finished the project. Yeah. And that coincided almost exactly to the finishing of my first semester in graduate school.
It's really interesting. What made you think you could do it?
I knew it. I just knew it. I knew it in my bones that I could do it. And I wasn't afraid to work. So I did all the faux finishing. I made all the mistakes. I understood spatial recognition for furniture. And I infused it, even that particular young project, with my spirit.
You can say spirit, but I think it doesn't really articulate very well the layers of ancient wisdom that you pull into your work. And it's profound. And I think that's something that could you address that? Could you just talk a little bit about the depth of it?
I think it's still unfolding for me too, to be honest. Yeah. So about a year ago, I was really honored to receive the Taiwan Geomancy certification. And a geomancer is basically a person that listens to the land. And so it's a little likened to acupuncture for land as opposed to acupuncture for bodies. And my meditation practice for many years has prepared me for that level of subtlety in terms of listening. And it allows me to tap into a larger field, and it allows me to keep in mind the energy of the land itself, the spirit of the house, which is so predominant in all of my internal dialogues, and then also the people that are inhabiting the home. And so on the surface, it really looks like this is where the chair goes and this is where the plants go, and here's access to the outside through these windows and doors. And all of that is tantamount because balance and flow are created when everything has room. And so that can be a really good space plan, or that can be listening for that which wants to come through. And that little magic box right there is what requires so much patience and trust, because it's very similar to an acupuncturist, because they're listening for the stream. They're listening for where there's a break in the flow, and they're trying to connect things back up together. And that's what I'm trying to do too. And whether or not people ever notice or even acknowledge that there's a couple of different layers that are happening, it's just what's happening. Because everything has an innate energy, everything has a form, and sometimes a presence. And sometimes it's not quite so special. Sometimes a chair is just a chair, right? But together, what you're looking for are the forms and the nothingness in between the forms. Right. So when I was dancing, I studied Martha Graham for a long time. And sometimes people think that when you curve, you're retracting and you're getting smaller, but you're actually pushing space away. And so there's just as much interest. You kind of go up to go back as opposed to go down to contract. And when I'm looking at forms, I'm looking at them the same way. So it's the shape that the item creates. And then there's the shape and the space around the items. And so not only is there the energy from the element, there's the energy between the elements when they're all put together.
Yes.
Right.
Thank
and
you.
Then the shape and the form and the colors and the textures create a narrative, a visual narrative. And I would also say an energetic narrative.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you for expanding into that, because it is hard to articulate the energy of things. And I think as a garment designer, I do the same thing with people and textures and how they hold their body, carry themselves, what their life is like, the colors, the type of material that their body tells me they can tolerate. It's really an interesting flow. So to hear you talking about that as a house, I'm like, you're just expanding my world, Paige. So what is your goal with LocziDeisgn? What do you want to do?
It's a question, because I'm starting to branch out. We're designing a program with the Museum of Craft and Design right now, that I'm part of an organization called Make Conscious. I'm one of the founding members. And Make Conscious is an organization that's just trying to embed our everyday lives, for lack of a phrase, with a little bit more relevancy or consciousness, and bringing consciousness to other realms. So we have a 1-year residency, and we're collaborating with them and some of the artists and residents to develop a series of workshops that kind of take others through the daily practices that we all use, really, to keep ourselves facile and grounded. And the idea is that you listen, and then you transform, and then you activate. I'm transforming my business right now. And what it looks like for me is allowing myself to be the creative director and have my hand in the various projects and the various regions where I can be of the most service. And then to also continue to tap into and teach and create workshops, allow us to continue to elevate not only what it is that we're doing, but kind of activate the people around us that we are so inspired by. I'm interested in kind of spreading the magic around a little bit.
It's very exciting.
What
do you think? What do you think is the purpose of all this?
My purpose is to create beauty and to live a life of love. That's why I was created to be on this earth. And so beautiful. If we're really lucky, each of us gets an opportunity to live our purpose and to realize that purpose within our lifetimes.
So that's a good question. How did you realize your purpose?
I always knew that I was built for something magnificent. And I didn't know what that was. And for me, it's still unfolding, right? I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a wife, I'm a creator, I'm a teacher, I'm a designer. There are all these things that I do when I kind of use this as a vehicle. But at the heart of it has always been a very clear notion that I really love being a human being. I really love people and I really love being alive, right? And so whether I was teaching Unix to a bunch of astrophysicists or dancing in front of thousands of people or designing a home for someone, it's kind of all still the same thing, because the intention behind the connection and the kind of magic that comes from listening so well that you can really give someone something that's important for them, that doesn't change. And then I've been incredibly lucky to have had the time to really delve into what is my soul's purpose and how am I living my life through that lens of integrity. And I think it's the first question that you ask yourself, but it's certainly not the last. That's just the first step on the run, right? Because then you find all the areas of your life that you're out of integrity with, and then they're out of alignment, and then you've got to clean up your house.
Hopefully. Right?
Like the metaphorical house, the literal house, like there's no room for the clutter, right? And so then my responsibility for being true to the potential that I was given is even more vast, right? Because who gets a life where they get to actually live the embodiment of their divine purpose? Like,
it's so interesting, kind of, Paige. You know, there's so much gratitude in who you are. And I would go out on a limb and I would say a lot of people get that life if they are brave enough, if they choose it, if they listen. And so you just, effervesce so much gratitude and courage for the opportunity or stepping into those opportunities. And I would say a lot of it is created by you, around you, in your choices, in being a badass, in asking for what you need, in listening to your authenticity. I mean, yes. What do you think is the most exciting thing you've ever done professionally?
So each of my projects are kind of little babies. I think you can relate, right? They're each little tiny vignettes and windows into not only my soul, but the conversation between the person or people that I'm working with, and then what wants to come through. So I think the way that I would answer that question is to share with you how many new friendships I have as a collection of of these projects that I've done, right? And the new thread that I've been able to weave into the story of their lives, because I know the person that made the table, and I know the person that did the wallpaper, and I know the people that sit at the dining table, and I know the stories and the bread that's broken around the table. So for me, it's the weaving of the stories, because they add a layer to my existence when I reflect how I am through the lens of others. And that's what makes it exciting, because the symphony is created because of the amalgamation of experiences and conversations and moments, right? And the designs are another layer of the story that, when I look back at the entirety of my life, creates that other color that couldn't be created any other way than through that moment of time and place and situation and people and architecture and land. So that's why it's exciting, because it's a little like Merce Cunningham's work. Depending on where you were sitting in the room and what night you saw the show, it was different every time.
A new perspective all the time.
Always.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you gave your experience of the totality of your babies a color.
Yes.
A new color, like an untold color. So when you said that, I actually felt the color. It was really interesting.
Where did you feel it?
I felt it in my chest, and I felt it in my solar plexus. Yeah, it was really interesting. Okay, so
I would. Okay.
You would what? Go ahead.
I would posture to say that part of that is because we're talking about energy, and colors have different energetic frequencies to them. Yeah. And whenever we talk about color and we talk kind of heart to heart, like we're talking, it doesn't surprise me that your physical body had a response to the conversation that we're having, because there's an entire container that's being created during this conversation. And because you have a yogic background, and because you can attune to the frequency of what it is that we're creating, it showed up in your body as a kind of a reference and a bounce. So,
oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Part of the reason that I think our bodies are like temples and our homes are like temples, if we can make them that way, is because every space has a frequency, right? Whether or not it's our innate frequency or it's muddled up a whole bunch of crap because, you know, we drank a lot of Coke in our 20s. Eventually we get to this kind of true resonance, right? Yes. And our spaces also have the capability of returning back to the true resonance. So the reason that a temple space feels sacred when we walk into it is because the container of safety has been set, and it's really clear. The boundaries are clear, and the body can acquiesce almost and surrender to the larger field that it's walking into, because it knows it's being held or contained, right? So when we have our bodies attuned to that same level of self-mastery and self-awareness, then we can feel that vibrancy and that frequency shift in a conversation. Yes. Right? Just the same, where we can go into a sanctified space and feel held or feel met.
That's
the
right.
same way.
Or move. Right. Exactly.
Or moved.
Heart struck. Right. Exactly.
Or moved.
And you've touched a little bit on business in your business background. I want to know, what are your 3 top tools that really lead you on your road to success?
I have been incredibly lucky to have partnered with people that not only have my best interest at heart, but know how to do things and have access to knowledge that I don't innately have. I've always put people in my court that are better at the things that I don't really want to do. So ironically, I've been best served by surrounding myself with people that are really linear, that are really structured.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And also create systems that not only work, but are also adaptable to change. As I said, right now, I'm in this kind of transformational part of my business. It's like, okay, this all works. There has to be some time where you can be like, this has to go, this has to go. So no different than kind of cleaning the house.
Yeah.
But the more I can surround myself with people that trust me, and I can trust them inherently, but have skill sets that are differing than mine, then together we're a superset.
Yeah.
And we allow ourselves a chance to not make big glaring mistakes because you have the other person to testify for. You might want to think about this on the other perspective. So, you know, really good, clean systems and operational aspects so that the books have as much integrity and refinement as the people that are working on the front end and what the design looks like.
Yeah.
Is really what served me.
What do you think makes you a badass, Paige?
My innate joy.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. That's awesome. That's all of the questions I have for you.
That is Boss Lady.